Russian Revolution. We've just finished, or kind of finished, I should say, with quotes there, World War One. This is kind of part of World War One, but off to the side, and I'll show you guys what I mean by that. So, for the Russian Revolution, World War One sparked Russian nationalism and united most Russians to fight a foreign enemy, just as it would in the United States, just as it did during 9/11 or World War II or World War I when we needed to. Now, the problem that Russia had is its economic base was unable to facilitate a war effort. What that means is that they were unable to have or put a ton of spending into the war effort and to provide for their people. So soldiers often went without, and that would be food, clothing, weapons, or ammunition. Because of that, many Russians died. Now, without ammunition, sometimes they would send two people into battle with one gun, and one would have the extra ammunition. So if the guy with the gun fell, you picked up the gun and went from there. Kind of crazy. Now, the leader was Tsar Nicholas II. Tsar is like Caesar, and it can be spelt a couple different ways, but we're using the TSAR for Tsar instead of the C. So Tsar Nicholas II goes to visit troops, as a morale booster, that kind of thing. Well, during this time / a little bit before, they had this peasant, Gregory Rasputin. He helped their child somewhat get healed a couple different times, and so he kind of lived there with them. Well, when Tsar Nicholas left Tsarina, which is the female version, but his wife, Alexandria, in control and managed domestic affairs. She looked and relied on this illiterate peasant, Gregory Rasputin, for advice. And this, of course, did not end well. March 1917, the combination of disasters. So there's, of course, tons of soldiers dying, about 3 million, and of course, people not having food. We saw this with the French Revolution, and any other sort of revolution. People's main things are not provided for, so food, shelter, water, clothing. People start getting negative, and we might see something like that now with people not having money. We'll just see how that works out. So Tsar Nicholas says, you know what, if these people really don't want me here, I'm going to give up the throne. He does that. And then Duma, which is the Russian parliament, set up a temporary government, and they continue Russian involvement in World War I. Well, there's a little bit of positive, but the problem is, of course, things are only going to get worse. So Germany, knowing this, says, hey, let's release the most deadly weapon against the Allies in World War I. Now you can see a machine gun. There's gas. Those guys have gas masks. I want you to ask yourself the question, what is the most dangerous weapon? Or what was the weapon that they possibly released? They took Vladimir Lenin, who was exiled from Russia to Switzerland. He was trying to spread Marxist ideas. Think of communist ideas or equality, socialist ideas. So Germany says, hey, why don't we get this train? We're going to take it back, and we're going to bring Lenin all the way back to Russia. That'll cause some disarray. Well, it very well did. It caused the Bolsheviks, which adopted socialist ways through a revolution of workers, and then the Mensheviks, which adopted socialist ways through slowly reforming capitalism. And who, of course, would win? October Revolution 1917, the provisional government failed to support fighting World War I troops and feed and supply citizens. And since they couldn't do two things, of course, we're going to get people listening. Hey, I'm going to give you peace. We're going to take people out of war. You guys are going to have land so you can cultivate it. And then I'm also going to give you bread. Well, the Bolsheviks used the Red Guard or armed factory workers to overthrow provisional governments. Now, Really, it was just a perfect storm. This couldn't have happened if people had food, couldn't have happened if they had land or peace. But since you have all three of those things going together, people don't know if their kids are going to die. People knew people who died, if not had family members. So you get the Bolshevik or the communist rule. So it ended private ownership of land and distributed land to peasants. So peasants got some land. Again, the rich people are out. Workers would give control to factories. So if you are part of a factory, you own part of it. And in owning that, you get part of the wages. Now, that can be very good if you're thinking, hey, if we sell a whole bunch of this stuff, I'm going to do really good. Let's try to make as much as possible. Also, can be very bad because well, of course, with people owning land or people owning these other things, maybe they don't. And then people start selling their land. And so you're going to get into a cycle of this. March 1918, Russia signs a treaty of Brest-Litovsk, giving a huge chunk of Russia's western border to Germany and ended World War I in Russia. Now, this is the time that the United States has to join the war, partly because if they don't, then the full force of Germany is going to come down on the tired, hungry, and weary British and French forces. So you guys can see the Treaty of Bolshevik. They end up by giving parts here. And of course, we have the armistice line of 1917 armistice where they did not kind of fight, but they give that and just say, you know what, we're done. We're done here. Let's just go ahead and get our country back to normal. So Civil War, you have a Civil War from 1918 to 1921. That's the Reds versus the Whites, or the Bolsheviks versus the Mensheviks. Again, the Mensheviks, if we go back a couple slides, were people who adopted socialist ways through slowly reforming capitalism. So they want to have more socialism, but they also want to have kind of a free market. So the Mensheviks, they're a czar supports. They have Democrats and allies with the British, French, and United States. And the question to you is, why would the Allies want to end the Bolsheviks' reign in Russia? Well, after you've thought about that, the idea would be, again, if we're looking at they want a democracy and they want to kind of have the government more socialist, but they also want to have freedom and allow the market to kind of rule things. Those three countries are all market driven. So, of course, they're going to want that more. And they're not as, if we were going to put on a scale, they're not as communist as the Bolsheviks. So the bloody Civil War assassination attempts on Lenin, those were failed. Communists killed. So Nicholas II and wife and his 5 children were all killed. Allied help of the whites helped unify Russian nationalists under the Red Army. So if you're have an outside force that's helping, that's of course going to get the potential to have success, but also it's going to have propaganda against it. And then in 1921, the Red Army won. So the USSR, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or as you guys can see there, the Soviet Union. Lenin reunites Russian Empire. There is a theory the power to vote was given to all citizens 18 and over, and all political power, resources, and means of production was given to the people. So in doing this, they gave all these people some power, but they also gave people rights, in which case they truly wanted. In reality, the Communist Party was the supreme leader of the land and used military to maintain and control. And that's one of the huge problems with communism. They might say there's a vote, maybe they give it to people, but how true are the results? We have propaganda, or we have other things that kind of come in, and that's going to cause people to vote in different ways, or simply they just rig the vote. So that is the lecture for today. You guys can go ahead and take the quiz, and then of course go ahead and answer the questions. I have the one question on there, and then reply to your classmates. And I'll hopefully see you on Zoom.